All right, so we're recording now. So just an FYI. So thank you so much, Erica, for working with me over these past few weeks. As Erica said, my name is Cammie Jones. I serve as Associate Dean of Experiential Learning and Civic Engagement. And I have quite a bit of experience with working with experiential learning, engaged learning, curriculum design, and course design. And I've done this for quite some time now. And it's such a poignant time in higher education where we're thinking about how do we continuously connect with our community and the curriculum that we teach in a classroom in regards to the ELES program, engaged learning, or for some of you, you may have heard of service learning at other institutions. Before we get into the panel that we have for today, we first want to give everyone an opportunity to quickly just introduce yourselves. We'd like to know who's in the room, your background, maybe why you're here. This will give us an idea in regards to what we should focus on or touch on as we explore engaged learning in this conversation. So I'm just going to do a scroll through, and I see Ronald Harvey. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, I'm Ronald Harvey. I'm an American living in Sofia, Bulgaria. I teach psychology at the American University in Bulgaria. So we did we went all online starting in March this past year, and it was, you know, like everybody else, it was an emergency situation. And now we're preparing for a hybrid semester in the fall. And I have some idea how to do it. I don't have a lot of ideas on how to do it. And so I've started to attend these sessions to get that information, and they've been very helpful. People have been really awesome and very knowledgeable. And so I'm mostly here to listen and to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Leanne.
Sorry, I'm mute. Hi, my name's Leanne Ussher. I'm in the economics program. I'm an economics and finance professor. And last semester, I taught local community currencies in ELES. And this semester, coming up in the fall, I'll be teaching an accounting class, Introduction to Accounting in ELES. So primarily, I teach finance classes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm from Russia, St. Petersburg, anthropologist. And when this story with unknown disease began, I had been at a very far village, about 500 kilometers from St. Petersburg, when I am teaching. This online way of teaching was very very appropriate for my village, because I couldn't I couldn't live to St. Petersburg because of state this story. And my course was anthropological practice, and the students had field work about this disease and the state and in this situation, and they are in their own situations, and so on.
What is your name?
Tatiana Shipanskaya.
Hi, Tatiana.
Tatiana Shipanskaya.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Ludmila Constance. Ludmila Constance. I am an associate professor of the American University in Central Asia in Kyrgyzstan. And I said that I teach economics. And actually, I'm really glad to see economists here as well, because usually we have like teachers of languages, philologists, and so on. Actually, my main interest is test exam rubrics, how to provide tests in interclasses, because usually we are recommended to provide some like project and so on, but this is not possible if you teach intro to economics, right? So this issue are the most important for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Peter?
All right, hi, thanks for having me, Cammie. I teach in the, based in Annandale, and I teach in the sociology and the environmental and urban studies programs, and, you know, a variety of others as well, but those are my two home programs. And so today, I'm learning along with everybody else how to do this online, blended, whatever it is that will be, asked to do or forced to do in the fall, in the coming year or two, whatever it looks like. So I'm excited about the conversation. I'll talk a little bit about a class that I taught this past spring in a moment. So thanks for having me, Cammie. And Cammie and I have worked closely together over the past year. And I've also had some other opportunities. I met some folks from a lot of the BARD affiliated institutions in Berlin a few years back. So it's great to be connected again in this format.
Thank you. Eli?
Hi, I'm Eli Dueker. I'm a microbiologist. I'm stationed at BARD Annandale, and I work in the Environmental and Urban Studies program and the biology program. I have, ever since I came to BARD, I've been doing as much engaged learning as I can. So this is really a program that I just adore, and I'm really excited to be here to speak with you all. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the classes that I've taught, but in the past, the community engaged aspect, I find is something that as a professor, I need to practice to get better and better. So as Peter says, I'm here to learn as well. And I'm going to tell you how far I've gotten, but we are all learning together. So I'm happy to join this group and think together about these challenging times.
Thank you. Next we have Tatiana Rapina.
Yes.
Hi.
So I'm from St. Petersburg, St. Petersburg State University. I teach English for academic purposes at the moment, though my specialty is literature and American studies. And since all that happened, I had my students kind of spread all over Russia and beyond the borders of the Russian Federation. So to kind of I have two concerns. First, how to keep supervising and facilitating my students through the semester using all the possible technologies. And the other concern is actually how to engage them into their kind of communities they're in, right? So when we had kind of all of them gathered in one university, that was one thing. Now that they are spread all over the world, right, they need that kind of feeling of belonging, and that is kind of why I'm here.
Thank you, Tatiana. You'll definitely hear a lot about how you manage that with kids spread out all over the world. So you're in the right place. We have Erin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Canan. I'm the Dean for Civic Engagement, and I predate the ELAS program. I'm co-teaching a class in the fall and in politics. And so I'm just here to learn and figure out how we're going to do that in this hybrid environment.
Thank you. I think that's everyone. Okay. Thank you all so much for giving an introduction. It was really great just to hear the commonality. And so first, I just want to say you're not alone. Surprise. And today is going to give you an opportunity to really learn some tools also share some best practices that you have seen in regards of how to connect in an online environment while being engaged with your community. So just a quick background before I transition to our 3 faculty members who are here today. About 6 years ago, the Center for Civic Engagement in Annandale was interested in implementing a co-curricular program that would allow for civic engagement to connect within the classroom. So as I mentioned, a lot of you may have heard about service learning. We call it engaged liberal arts and sciences, because students are able to connect to community projects through their courses. At Bard, we want to go a little deeper into that concept and pedagogy, and so that's how ELES came to fruition. The program really allows for courses to bring theory to practice by linking coursework, critical thinking skills, and engagement activities within the classroom. And as many of you said, we definitely had a lot of privilege around that when everyone was in the same space and in the same classroom. But as we have realized during this transition of COVID, teachers have often had to become creative and innovative in regards to how to be an expert when your students are dispersed. How do you continue to be engaged? And one thing I think that's really important when we're thinking about engaged learning is that it's really about integrating civic engagement within an online environment. We must think about how to create this environment and how we can reach our ultimate course goals when we don't have the usual resources that we're accustomed to. So some of the things we'll be thinking about today is how can we spread awareness? How can we educate others or provide a platform to speak and connect? And how do we do this in a collective mindset that is different depending on the geography that you're in? So we're going to talk about assignments, different modes of technology, media, any points of engagement that we've seen, and see how we can better implement this in the fall semester, but also remembering the fact that we are a part of a network and that there are a lot of opportunities for us to connect and share best practices. In the chat box, as our speakers are talking, I will post some ELES resources. We recently just created an online workbook. This is based on best practices and models of engagement, not only based on BARD, but nationally best practices, because that's very important when we're doing this work, that we're aligned with our peer institutions in doing this. It also talks about the design. It also gives you some insight in regards to tools that you can use. So I will be posting that in the chat box. But enough about that and me. I'm going to transition it to our first speaker, which is Eli Dueker, who's going to give us an overview in regards to what he did this past semester, spring 2020, how he was able to pivot and be innovative, and maybe some best practices to share with you. So Eli?
Thanks, Cammie. So I'm going to tell you up front that I have a few ideas, and then I'm going to also tell you about things that didn't work. So it's not just going to be positive results here. So I was teaching 2 classes in the spring that were engaged. One was called Urban Oceanography, and then the other one was microbial remediation. So microbial remediation was focused on waste and how we deal with the environmental issue of waste. And the Urban Oceanography class was supposed to be a class where we were partnering with a high school down on an island in the New York Harbor. And so this high school was positioned at Governor's Island, and also was a school that was really focused on developing students from all parts of the city into having expertise in marine work and sciences. That was because we don't have an ocean, and it isn't very urban at Annandale at Bard. So I needed to, from the start, before COVID, I needed to be able to reach out to another institution. And so interestingly, my class started in February with working online with these high school students. So they had to already have kind of a remote connection. They were already communicating but we didn't have Zoom at that point. We had FaceTime and Google Meet and that kind of thing. And it was a partnership. So I had students in small groups in my class that then were engaging with high school researchers in the harbor class. And so they were working together on projects that the high school students had to do for their senior year. So they had high school senior projects. And so my students were helping them, and they were giving them feedback, but they were also figuring out actually what kind of research could be done. And then we were going to go down to the school and do that research with those students. So we had about a month and a half of successful remote engagement with the high schoolers. And what I found was the most helpful during that time was that after my students in their groups would meet with the small groups at the harbor, we would all get back together as a class and debrief the discussions that they had had. That was helping them, and then that actually helped my students figure out how better to engage with their high school students. And then it became this thing where the high school students were talking to each other about their experiences. My students were talking to each other about their experiences. And so we ended up having this interesting situation where the small groups knew each other, but then with the conversations that were happening in all the groups, everyone kind of got to know each other and what were the other people doing, you know, what were the techniques that were working. And they all kind of learned together from, okay, texting does not actually help. They learned that. And FaceTime is probably better. And so there are a lot of like learning that was happening with both groups. Unfortunately, when COVID shut down the public schools in New York City, we had to end that collaboration. But what it did was it prepared my students, interestingly, for this online environment. So they had already figured out how to engage with people they didn't know and were just meeting online. And so they were a little bit more prepared accidentally for the situation that occurred when we had to go online fully. So when we went online fully and the New York schools shut down, I continued the small groups with my students, and we continued. We of course couldn't do lab work, but we continued to discuss what they had worked on with their high school students, and I tried to extract as much learning from that engagement as possible. Interestingly, that was one of the best classes I've ever had because they really had bonded through not just the class itself, but through the shared experience of working with these high schoolers. And that class I didn't have any trouble with somehow in terms of having them show up in the Zoom environment. But what didn't work is that I lost my capacity to teach them anything about lab sciences. So, and that's something that I'm still working on. We had to move to using data, raw data, and trying to simulate experiences that they may have had, at least quantitatively, in the classroom. I think with the microbial remediation class and the waste class, the microbial remediation class that I had is a part of a cluster that we conduct. It's an engaged liberal arts and sciences cluster that we conduct on Bard campus that connects two other classes. One is a sculpture, studio arts class, and then the other one is an anthropology class. And so we called it a cluster because we would meet all of us, all of our students and the three professors would meet 4 times during the semester to kind of do a check-in and then facilitate interdisciplinary discussions about the issue of waste, the environmental issue of waste. So from the anthropological standpoint, we did, all of us together did an anthropological exploration of the issue of waste and then had an interdisciplinary discussion. That was as far as we got. We had an in-person speaker who came in, an urban anthropologist who actually studies waste, came in and gave a big talk to everyone in the class. So then once COVID happened, then we couldn't have any more in-person engagement. But so we had our Zoom engagement where we had all these 3 classes and the 3 professors together. And the weird thing from that is that we did that twice. those were the best discussions we had had. And we've been conducting this waste cluster for, I think, 4 years now. Something about the Zoom environment and bringing together these 3 different classes allowed students to engage even more deeply in discussion and to share more than we had witnessed in person. And this is something that we're still trying to sort out, but there's something about the Zoom environment, and probably you've noticed this, where some students are speaking up more than they had in the classroom. So I thought that was very interesting. I think my takeaways from this learning moment is that we have this opportunity where all communities are online as well. So it isn't just us being in an online environment with our students. All the community work across the United States, at least, is being conducted completely online. So my students now, so I also run the Center for the Study of Land, Air, and Water, which has internships that are connected with environmental and engaged community work. And so we also increased the internships that we were hosting during after March 15th. And what we did was we hooked up our students with community groups and with data that had been sitting around that communities needed. My students actually ended up being able to be part of community conversations that usually they wouldn't have been part of, because now they could call in on Zoom, they could witness the discussions between community members and municipal leaders and elected officials, and they suddenly weren't so overwhelming in terms of when they showed up at these community calls. It wasn't like 10 students overwhelming these poor 5 community members that are trying to meet. The Zoom environment made it so that they were actually able to observe and not to change the context as much. So those are the things that I've noticed. I think it's I really am excited to lean into the fact that COVID is an international issue. And what I'm really excited about is that community work now is probably more accessible to more of my students, no matter where they are. And I'm excited to help facilitate them in the classes that I have coming up. Is that helpful? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. It was really good. I'm teaching a class. I have 3 more classes. Yes, I'm counting down because online learning, it seems like it's just an extended calendar. And I have to agree with you with something you said about the community that you can build within a class because of the accessibility with Zoom. I'm very surprised by that. I was very nervous about how students would respond in this environment, just looking at us during a screen. But I think it's about the activities and the routine that you create to allow them to feel comfortable. And I know that's something that you and Ellen and Sophia did in your classes that made them feel like they could speak up and be engaged. And I also am so surprised that community members that are willing to just drop into a Zoom and talk to your students, not only locally, but I've been able to get some national organizations to pop in. So that's been really exciting. So in a lot of ways, I like that your focus is about the opportunity right now. And it's a very unique opportunity for us. So thank you so much for that. It's a really good thing because it transitions to Peter, because you talked about community conversations, and that's what Peter's all about. Of course, with other things too, but that's one of the things that happened in his class. So Peter, would you like to take it to the next step?
Sure, yeah. I don't know if it's the next step. It's great to hear Eli talk, and I'll reference some things that kind of are in line, and it made me think. So I'll add some comments. And I also like this. I agree with what Cammie was saying. I was just typing these notes. I think one of the overall lessons that I'm sort of learning right now and trying to figure out how to move forward is, how do we take these challenges and make them opportunities, right? How do we take this moment and just switch things that would normally seem like, how do we do this? And we all filled with anxiety. And I heard at least 1 or 2 of you say, right, how do we engage? How do we help students engage when they're all over the world sometimes, right? And those are challenges, but then how do we lean into that? So it's really nice to hear you kind of stress that point, Eli. And I hadn't really put it in my head that way fully until this moment. So, but it's true. So this past spring, I taught a course called Hudson Valley Cities and Environmental Injustice. And so it was really locally based, specifically on Kingston, New York, which is just across the river from the Annandale campus. Right here in the Hudson Valley in New York. And it was focused on urban change and environmental justice, right? Sort of the unequal impacts of environmental change on communities of color, on, you know, how it impacts people based on race, class, and gender. And so when the pandemic, we were engaging with the community in different ways, having guests come to class. We were going over to Kingston every other week or so. And when the pandemic hit, you know, it presented big challenges, and I was really worried. But on the other hand, this class was actually, like Eli said about one of his courses, it actually transitioned really smoothly in a weird, you know, it was surprising. And I think this was for a couple of reasons. One, the course material, the pandemic sort of showed it sort of brought, the pandemic highlighted the issues that we had been discussing in class, right? It showed the inequalities across racial, class, and gendered lines. So everything we had been talking about sort of smacked all of the students and myself right in the face, right? We could sort of see it. And so that, it made the conversations really rich. We could keep reading material that the students could see was impacting the community that they were studying in this moment, right? Because of the pandemic. So we had to switch. And also, and I had written this before Eli talked about it, but it was all about the class I had noticed had already bonded and had built trust among each other. So I think this is something I am really thinking about. How do I do that at the beginning of courses in the fall semester? So things that I may have taken for granted in the past in sort of developing community in a class that would have happened naturally over time, spending time to do that intentionally will be really important. And I've talked to other faculty about this. And so I think that, I don't know the practical tips, and I'm, you know, and I'm looking for people to also give me ideas, right? But thinking through, how do you develop community in a class, whether it's online or in person, when some of us will have a short, maybe some amount of time together, but not as much, or maybe not at all. So thinking about how we do that, maybe in small breakout groups on Zoom where students get to know each other better, and you know, as faculty we can pop in to some of these groups or other, like, we can think through some practical ideas. But I think that becomes really important, and developing that early on. So that was really important. And in this class, the students felt like really invested in what they were learning about this community. They had been really impacted by the issues that they saw in this community in Kingston that they didn't even know existed, right? Half these students didn't know really what Kingston was about, or even that it was there. They thought Kingston is one place of this kind of this area of like malls and stores, and they didn't even know what community we were really going to be exploring. And so they suddenly became really invested in this place. So that became really important in continuing. And so for the students, and I'll share a couple of slides with some of the groups that actually wanted to do something, right? Because they were invested in this place, even in just a couple of months, they wanted to figure out how could they help without burdening the community in this moment of real challenge that emerged. So I'll talk about a couple of really practical things that happened in my class. Some things didn't work, some things did. And so I'll move to that now. Hopefully that gives enough background for what that class was, and kind of why these classes seem to be, and I've heard this from other classes as well, they seem to be working really well in this moment. One, you know, Cammie asked us to share some activities that we did to help us reach our goals. And one, I sort of had to shift my ideas of what the main goals of the course would be, and I'm continuing to do that for the courses I'm planning for the fall. we still maintain shared readings, and I shifted assignments. But what I did was I didn't abandon everything I was doing with kind of the shared readings we were doing, but I did reduce what we were reading, and I adjusted it to the moment, because it didn't make sense suddenly to like read all this stuff I was planning on doing that suddenly seemed out of date. So I really had to modify things and connect it to what was happening in the moment. So we spent half the class discussing those kind of shared topics, but then what I did is I used the Zoom breakout groups or breakout function in order to have one-on-one time with me or time with me and small groups. And that was really important. And so because they could connect with me in this sort of, in this way that they could talk about the specific issues or their actual projects. It kept them motivated about doing something with their community, whatever that meant for them. And I can talk about a couple of the specific projects, right? But they wanted both. They wanted to think big and think specifically about the topic, right? So I for this class, they didn't want to let go of either thing, it turned out. And so for me, I just thought that would be helpful. And so, and then when it came to so that was just one practical thing that worked for me and for some other faculty I've talked to. Two, I made the assignments because of, in that moment of kind of everything changed for everyone all of a sudden, I made the assignments, particularly in this class, really flexible. I allowed some students to write a typical seminar paper. Because they were in a situation personally for lots of different reasons where they couldn't think about how to engage with a community anymore, right? And so that worked for them and they might adapt it in some other way. I allowed some to write an op-ed, right? Think about how they could write an opinion piece about this particular topic and those sort of things. But there were a number of groups that wanted to continue in an engaged way. And so here, I'll share my screen here and just share a couple of those projects so you get an idea of what some folks did, and then I'll stop. And this will give you an idea of some specific things here, and then you can ask questions later. Are you seeing the PowerPoint? Yeah, okay, great. I'm not, because I have a bunch of other things up. Okay. So one which has gotten has grown some interest here. I had a couple of students who saw that one of the groups that was being hit the hardest was the homeless population in Kingston, and so they created this now. Well, it'll eventually probably be a nonprofit of some sort. It's turning into a various thing, but they created a campaign. And this group called Thrive on Kingston, and they created kits designed for the homeless. They raised, as you can see, within a week, $4,000 over their goal, and they put together kits. They worked with some community members that Cammie helped connect them to, also through me and some others, and they raised money. One of the students wasn't anywhere near Kingston, but could work remotely and with some community partners to do something that mattered in the community. And so that was a really successful campaign. And then some other folks, let's see here, that is not, oh, there we go. Some others wanted to continue to develop some ideas for how do we create a way to have conversations with the community? And they've been learning about housing inequality, so they took what they learned and created a toolkit on how do we actually talk about housing. And they created sort of an online way to do that. And they have this 20-page document now that could be used by community members and adapted by community members. So it was a really impressive document, which we can share if you want. And another did the same thing. We were talking about food inequality and food justice. So they created a community dinner series, which may be able to be implemented in the future. So these were projects that they didn't need to work directly with community members. They could work from afar in different ways where in which they could use what they were learning, but adapt it to kind of, right, something really practical that could be then adjusted in the future, but was some sort of living document. And so I just wanted to share those to give you some practical ways that they could, I can't see now. Did I stop my sharing? Okay, now I can't see my, okay, there we go. Sorry, my screen went black for a moment there. So the summary that I would have is I would keep that one-on-one time with students, even if it sacrifices some larger group discussions. I allowed a lot of student guided, I allowed students to guide what they did. Because students wanted to be engaged. They wanted to be able to do something and make a difference in their community. And so of course, you know, I, along with Cammie and others, were helping to find ways to do that. And so I'll stop there because we'll have time for Q&A. Yeah, hopefully that just gives you some ideas.
Yeah, that was really great, Peter. I think the key thing that you said that stood out to me is not shying away from what's happening in the world. That is a focus for ELES and BARD. We are trying to integrate current events that are happening into the courses because it allows for students to have a high level of buy-in. This is something that's affecting everyone, as you said, globally, which is really imperative right now. And I think another thing you brought up that a lot of people are trying to figure out is like, well, why are students able to easily transition online with these courses? And I have to say it's because of the foundation and what these courses are all about. It is about engaging. It is about taking ownership of your learning in some aspects, as you said, Peter. And when students sign up for these classes, we automatically tell them that like you're going to be a part of this narrative. You're going to be able to connect with the community and engage. And it makes learning relatable to students. They're able to build on what they already know. And it provides opportunities for them to make connections and build on their knowledge base. So those are some things that I have noticed via assessments about why students are engaged, and it's easy for them to transition online or even start from the beginning, because I'm teaching a class where it started completely online, but the key thing was being able to educate them in regards to the purpose of the course and what our outcomes are for the class. So that's been really helpful. I don't want to take too much time. I'm going to transition to Leanne, and then we'll have Q&A. So Leanne.
Hi. I was so happy that Ludmila was on the call, and I spoke with her privately. She had to leave, but we have just touched base, and she has my email and everything. So we're going to reach out to her. Because I'm also really interested in connecting with other OSUN professors, especially if they're interested in teaching about money and finance. So my class, this is the first time I taught this class. It was, I had kind of run into Cammie and found out about ELES, and so quickly put something together and requested if I could teach a course on local community currencies or local complementary currencies. So a local currency is any payment system. So whether you have a payment system which is based on US dollars, but you could also have payment systems based on coupons or bus tokens or barter or you know, any arrangement of local currencies. These days, Bitcoin is all the rage, but whether it's a cryptocurrency or any currency, we've now realized individuals can make money. So the transitioning into the COVID situation was absolutely perfect for my course because local currency anything where communities are trying to get together, but just for some reason don't have the money, but have resources that they want to exchange with each other, and trying to help people with delivery, trying to help people with older people get access to things. Any sort of exchange system can be coordinated better when you have an accounting system behind it. And the currency is just an accounting system. And so we started out, I'll share my screen. We started out using a tool. this was before we went to COVID. I was trying to do some network analysis in my course, and so I was looking at using Mathematica initially, but then we dropped that and just used this tool called Kumu, and kumu.io, that's the address. Any sort of complex system that you might want to map, you can map in Kumu. And so you create your agents, you know, whether it's the school and the children, the municipality. In this case, this is about a local currency that was created in Brazil. And actually, because of this local currency, this town in Brazil called Curitiba was nominated a World Environmental Town, and it was mainly because they somehow got food security and garbage in the favelas under control by issuing bus tokens and helping people get jobs downtown. And so we have all these different networks, whether it's the bus tokens here. You can kind of highlight what the network is, so how the bus tokens circulate around, or other currencies that are there. So the first thing that we did, the students mapped this, and then they gave a presentation to Hudson Valley Current. Let me just see if I can, I tried to put, oh, here we are. So the students, I only had 5 students. They went and gave a presentation to the local currency in Kingston called Hudson Valley Current. This is their website. They really appreciated the fact that the students came and told them how a currency works in Brazil. And that was one of our first visits. And then we went on a visit to Hawthorne Valley, who is a member of the Hudson Valley Current, so who accepts a local currency called Current. And we spoke to them, and we got data to map their what's it called? Their CSA. It's the Community Vegetable Delivery System, right? So that was a possible project that the students could take. The final goal was for the students to collect data and create a network and show how a complex system work and can be benefited by a currency. No one actually chose to do that project. But one of the projects of my 5 students that they did shows was, one did it with O Positive. So O Positive is a very successful group in the Kingston, in the Hudson Valley, and they swap musicians get to play in festivals. And for those 3 days, wellness care providers come and give massages and physiotherapy, dental work, very serious things. And they swap. The festival raises money, and the doctors come and give these, do this exchange. So it's kind of like a barter exchange, although there's an NGO in the middle. So he collected all the data from their website, one of my students, and so created this map. And so you can click on, you can click on one of these are the wellness providers in Kumu, and it can show you, you can have information about each one. I don't know whether okay, so here's this person. So, and he has connected them by zip code. So now he knows which network, for each central node, he has a zip code, and then he has around it the wellness providers. And you can, do all sorts of things with this network analysis, but it's just to, you can zoom in here, and the O Positive was so impressed with what he did, they gave him an internship to continue working with this. Another project, so everyone had to write up their project, and basically it was kind of like a startup. Like, what is the minimum viable product? What are you going to offer? And so this student took the case of the Bard volunteer delivery service on the Bard campus, which was for those 250 students that were left on campus after COVID occurred, most people left, some stayed, and there was a delivery service taking place, and it was very elaborate because you had to make sure you weren't, spreading the disease. Rather, you were being sensible how you would do it, and so you need smaller clusters to ensure that if you do have a cluster or a can contact trace, all these kinds of things really work well with the network. And so one of my students, and all the students wrote up a proposal like this, where they would have their, what's the problem, what's the solution, a project description, and then what would be their minimum viable product. This is very much startup talk, and how would you measure the success of the project? Another project was, was by, so one of the things I found that didn't work fully, and it's probably because we were trying this out, is that the Kumu networks that we created, we got so far with them, but we didn't actually get to finish them. But the student can keep continuing with the project. And so one of my students, Kevius, created a project about food security. He's creating something called the Green Grocer, which is going to deliver food around a neighborhood in Kingston, in Ponkaki. And so we have here all of his charity organizations that are going to donate food. And they're sending to this node. I don't know whether you can see this. It's kind of hard to see. I can zoom in. And you can, so he hasn't yet set this up, like drag these nodes to a place where you can really kind of see the network in an easier fashion. But these types of networks, you just fill in an Excel spreadsheet, you drop it in, and boom, it just populates. And all this information is on the Excel spreadsheet, and it's just a great way for, if you want to study a complex system, how you get the stock flows, like all what are you circulating? Like in his case, he's circulating food from grocers to his location, to the people, in exchange for currents, which are going back to those places. And they might be donating currents to other local gardens or local institutions. And so you end up having this whole ecosystem that in theory could be supported just with a local currency. Although in most cases you do need to supplement it with US dollars. But that was another one. And we also had a musician who was collected all the names of musicians and venues in the Hudson Valley, and took their websites, gave some documentation, and thought about a project where, what if there was a union of musicians who were selling their product to all these venues, and the venues had to employ the musicians, and they couldn't cherry pick, but they had to employ everyone on a regular basis. And in part, they would pay them with a local currency, which would be circulating around the community. So with my 5 students, we had just an amazing time. It was a great time to explore this, and a lot of this data was collected online. In fact, all this data was collected online. We had interviews with people online. In the beginning, we did have that physical contact, which was great. Like Peter was saying, that teamwork probably helped a lot in the beginning, but we found that we got a lot of access to people because we were online. So it was a really great experience, and it was wonderful. Thanks, Cammie.
Thank you, Leanne. And thank you to all of the panelists. As you can see with these 3 classes, or 4, I should say, there is different points of engagement and approaches to teaching these classes. For the most part, most of these classes were hybrid in the beginning. We didn't even know it. We started all in place and then we transitioned online. And they have shared a lot of tools and wisdom in regards to how to do this and best practices. So before we wrap things up, I want to give an opportunity for anyone to either send us a question in the chat box or just ask them directly. It's a small group, so you can easily just jump in and just ask the questions to the group.
So our university has an international student body. We have about 60 different countries represented. It's a small liberal arts college, but it's about half Bulgarian and then half from other parts of Central and Eastern Europe. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on teaching that sort of cohort, you know, international students. It's an English language university, you know, and very, very different backgrounds, but also some similarities, but it's an American style liberal arts university. Just if you have any thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And also thank you so much for the presentations. That was very interesting and useful.
Mm-hmm. Eli?
That sounds like a huge challenge. I think that is what we ended up, we didn't have a language barrier, but with all of our students dispersing back to their homes, we did end up with suddenly our students were on a daily basis experiencing something very different. There was no cohesive experience that they were having anymore. And I think what I decided to do, and and as I'm planning my courses for fall, both of my courses, I'm teaching a network course that is focused on water, and I'm teaching a course that is focused on environmental justice and mapping. What we're doing in both of those courses is building an arc that ends up with a final project that focuses on where their home is. So wherever they are, because at Bard, we don't know much, but what we do know is that after Thanksgiving, after the 20th of November or so, we will be all remote. And so what we're doing is we're building this arc so that once they go back to their homes, they're doing a final project that uses that as a learning moment. So we're designing the courses so that we're helping them, we're working with them to start exploring what is available in their homes, their hometowns. You know, what are the sources of data? What are the sources of information? What are the community groups that are there? So, and we're doing that during kind of scaffolding that throughout the course so that by the time they're at home, they have gotten guidance and they've talked to their fellow students about where they come from and how they're going to get things. And then when they get there, that's when they do it. And so I think what we're going to do then is have the students constantly be checking in. We'll be using the Zoom and the breakout function a bunch. Maybe we'll arrange them geographically. We're not sure yet, but really what we're doing then is trying to take advantage of the broad range of experiences, the daily experiences that students are having, and have that be part of the class. It's interesting. I think arranging them geographically kind of starts helping them have sort of a sense of cohesion. So in the United States, every state ridiculously has their own COVID plan. And so every state that was represented by our students had something interesting to share, right? So really just trying to take advantage of that and putting it in the context of what you're teaching. I think is that worked with this hybrid situation. We're hoping it will work again, but that's kind of how we're trying to deal with that, making it a positive and really focusing on difference as being a way to learn.
Yeah.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Peter, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound pretty similar probably, because I agree with Eli, right? It's about taking what seems like the giant challenge and switching it into an advantage. And one thing I heard on another call, and I think it is smart and something I try to do in other classes in a normal circumstance, but tend to forget, is sort of, and this is just in general, but I think it fits with this, is start with like the final assignment and decide what you want your students to do for the end product, and then back up from there. So, and this fits with your question, I'll get back to that. It's right, as Cammie says, backward design, right? But it becomes even more important in this case, right? Because if you have students in 60 different, I mean, who knows how many different countries, right? About half your students in different countries, right? maybe that becomes, you think about using, or we have it in, you know, out of 20 students, 10 different states, right? You might have them in 10 different countries, right? But say, right, how do you use that to advantage to either have a project or something where they might be working in pairs or some small group where they create something where they think about the differences or similarities in those places, right? I'm actually doing something silly and doing this urban sociology tutorial with a few students because they're behind in credits because they were studying abroad, blah, blah. Anyway, so they're in 3 different locations this summer, but they're taking this moment of all these protests and the pandemic, and they're creating a podcast together. It's sort of like a seminar because they're advanced students and whatnot, but they are looking in their own hometowns and creating a podcast or a series of podcasts together about what's happening in their own towns and connecting it with the course material. I don't know what's going to happen, but they're basically sharing their stories as, you know, and what might happen in small town in California might be different than Manhattan, but what are they learning about those different stories? What lesson comes out of that that says something larger, right? That sort of comparative model is something, can be something rich that I don't know what the answer is going to be, what they're going to find, but they're going to find it, right? That sort of student guided learning. And so what might be different in 2 countries, you know, good, great. We get to learn too from that experience. So I think that model adapts really well. That sort of like, you know, what Eli's doing in his class, I'm doing right now with students as well. So
yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, Peter. And I'm dealing with this right now because I do have students in an international course through OSIN Summer. So I actually have kids from Brock, and they're really awesome, by the way. One thing I would say, just to add to what both Eli and Peter said, is, you know, you have this final product or project that students have to complete. And it's really imperative that on a weekly basis, you create an opportunity for them to connect online with some kind of tool that's connected to the topic of the week. So my class is module based. Every week we have a specific topic that's connected to the subject of the course. On Tuesdays, they know that they specifically are going to go deep into the reading and there'll be some activities, but on Thursday, we're building on their skills and they have to present on a topic that's connected with the subject for the week, but their positionality from their home. And that's wherever they are. And one thing that helps us to do that and create that camaraderie around those assignments and presentations on Thursdays, I use Padlet on a weekly basis. This is an online virtual bulletin board that allows for students to post pictures and have conversations with each other on whatever the assignment is for the week. And it leads to some of those best practices I talked about, where students are having ownership and agency around the class. And they're also are allowed to teach the students in the class. I actually posted in the chat box, a link to the ELES course workbook, because it actually talks about backward design and how it's important to figure out what's your end goal. And then you can start to insert little routines of engagement and activities that allow for students to be a part of a bigger focus for the class. So that's just something I wanted to add to that too, that I'm dealing with right now, because I have kids from all over the world and it's English based, and it is successful because we consistently, repeatedly do the same thing every week, but it's a different focus. Yeah.
Cammie, can you type the name
Yes,
of the program that you use?
I will send a link. And we have an institution license, FYI.
Yeah, and it connects to what Aaron's question is about Kumu specifically, but also like what other tech tools do we have, and what is tech friendly on a phone and what isn't, right? Because many students are accessing things, right? And how Moodle works on a phone and how do certain things work on phones, you know, because a lot of our students, right, when they're not at Annandale, for example, might be doing a lot of their material and reading on a phone, you know, and so we have to think through some of those things as well.
We have an academic technologist. So I think, Erica, tell me if I'm wrong, will she have some workshops coming up either with you or CFCD, I want to say? Maybe?
Yeah, I think that right now we're exploring the institutional license question. I think that we have Padlet has an OSUN license, so anybody in the network can use it. I don't know about other tools. I also just wanted to chime in on this topic because you know, before I came to Bard, I taught at an American university in New York City that is incredibly diverse, and no student I worked with spoke English as their first language. And this is slightly different because it was in person, but I'm finding myself drawing on the practices from that teaching experience as I'm planning for my fall course, in that I'm trying to make sure that there are a lot of opportunities for students to co-create knowledge with us by way of translation. So I'm teaching a writing, poetry, sort of creative writing literature course. And what I'm trying to figure out is ways to invite students to work across the different languages that they speak as, you know, one way to generate some of the material that we actually study together. And then that also enables us to look at the differences of translation. So, you know, how does something read in English as opposed to Russian? If you speak both languages, how do you gauge what makes for a good translation? And then what does that tell you about the text and you know, the role of that kind of literature, kind of writing within the context that it comes from? So that's just my tiny 2 cents.
Thank you.
Yeah, but Ronald, I'll put my email in the chat box, and you know, any of you can write to me at any time, but I can also connect you to, you know, I know that our colleagues at Bard College Berlin have a similar student body, so I could link you up with people there if you're interested.
Our Dean of Faculty is sending out all of these meetings from all these different places all over the world. So yeah, there's a lot of sharing going on.
Great.
Thanks.
That is true. Everywhere. Any other questions? Okay.
Cammie, I have a question.
Well, maybe just another comment.
No, go ahead.
Dean, you first.
You go ahead, Tatiana. Mine is, I can ask you.
Okay, great. Mine is also kind of more a comment than a question. I like that Peter talked about the time we have to allocate at the very beginning of the term for students to get to know each other. Because my experience, which when we're talking about the ones which didn't work, was that when the students actually went back to their hometowns, all the projects we had been running for kind of for a month, or at least we were planning to do, all of a sudden they dispersed. And the concern of the students was whether we can work on that project maybe with the local community, with my friends at home, rather than kind of build that on with those who are now in different time zones or so that was kind of the tricky moment of the course. And thanks to EUS, I understand, actually that was my experience as well, that when you face a problem, right, if you have that freedom, and for Russian universities, that is a lot of kind of will and freedom to change the syllabus on kind of mid-semester, but kind of trying to incorporate and engage the students who are facing that situation. Oh, I would like to do that individually. I don't need any help because it's too much of a technical problem. It's too much of a communication problem. So that was the something that kind of popped up in my mind when I was listening to your experiences. And the other thing which is important for us as well is in many cases here in Russian universities, we have that idea that if we have a course, it is kind of very individual. So very seldom we have the practice of actually putting together a couple of courses together, like you talked about joining arts course and environmental one into kind of very productive discussions, because that won't hurt. I see the advantage of that, right? And if, I'm talking about myself. So if I can do that, right, I would be happy to. I could put an excuse to COVID situation, that now we have kind of lack of community at the university, and now I'm looking at the community outside. So probably even with BART, right, we have such a wonderful partnership going on. So we can kind of run those kind of conferences or discussions, right, at the time slot, which would be convenient for both sides. And that would kind of benefit the students, first of all, and the educational and the engagement process altogether. So sorry, Leanne, if I interrupted what you wanted to say.
I just want to say, yeah, I think that, yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm Australian, and in Australia, we have very, our courses are often taught by several professors. And so whether it's an expert in your field, it's not so cross-disciplinary, but often you have the expert in the field come to your class and give that lecture. And I'm always surprised how individualistic classes are here in the States. You know, it's very much about one person teaches, it's their program, and it could be totally different from another one, even though it's the same topic, which obviously is a lot of freedom for the academic, but that alternative of that, all that cross-pollination is so freeing and liberating, because then you can focus on what your expertise is instead of having to cover all these topics that maybe is not your expertise. And I think in this environment, adding other cross-disciplinary areas, you could learn so much, but I haven't seen it happening. And I know in my program, when we discussed it, there was resistance. So I don't know, it sounds a great idea.
Yeah, you're already giving me some ideas of things for the fall semester. I know it's going to be a crazy one, but I know we definitely plan to continue to connect with each other around this and doing some check-ins during the fall. So maybe we'll create another series, but more of where are you with things? And maybe how we can adjust, because that's something that we did as a group when COVID so I was in, I had to travel to EHU in January for a network course planning meeting. And so I was hearing about COVID over there, and I was just like, what is that? Like, you know, and I mean, it took a long time for it to come to the US where people were talking about it. And then like overnight, we were like, whoa, school's closed. And yeah, it was just like, whoa, this is crazy. And so we had to have like, I call it support group meetings on a weekly basis, where we were just checking in with each other and really sharing not only about our classes, but how we can help each other out. And so that's one of the things that I think is really important here, is that you're not alone. There's a group of people who are doing this work. And we were just facing ourselves within, you know, with doing this work, but we definitely need to be mindful of our network and see if there's opportunities where maybe once or twice a month, you know, you can jump in on one of our ELES like support groups and just share your ideas, your thoughts, maybe things that you've experienced or tools that you can share with us, or maybe just like, oh my God, I've thrown everything at the wall and it's not working. What can I do? And we definitely can support you. So I'm definitely putting that down as something that we should do in the fall semester, to connect with anyone who's been on these series, because I've been at every meeting and I've met different people every time. So I know there's quite a few of us spread throughout the world, as our students are, that want to talk about this and want to support each other. So.
And I'm, just a quick thought is that, you know, my students are doing and learning in the fall, they're going to be learning accounting. And I could imagine that lots of classes, projects, want some consultation with accounting, like how should we set up the accounts for this project I'm doing? And they could come in and give a visiting lecture, or or vice versa. And it could be an international collaboration.
I think that would be fantastic, Leanne. And, you know, I've been doing these really informal drop-in hours since March, and, you know, I'm happy to kind of keep them going, but I feel pretty strongly that I don't want to be prescribing what the content is. So I'm happy to offer this space if, you know, there are topics that folks want to gather and talk about. You know, just write to me and let me know and I'll organize it.
Oh, Eli, before we wrap up.
I just wanted to say, Tatiana, I thought those are some really great ideas. So I think with the water network course that we're teaching, I'm partnering with AUCA and Rock University in Bangladesh and Fulbright in Vietnam. And it's a public health class, it's a urban studies class, and our class, which is environmental sciences. I would love to continue doing those sorts of things. So I can put my information in the chat, but please let me know if you want to be involved in one of those with us. The other thing is that I think we have a lot going on this fall with speakers and these network courses. And so I was wondering if maybe we could also share in some way across the network, what are all these opportunities? Because as I said, you know, it's not overwhelming anymore to add a whole other class to a Zoom. It really isn't. Or we could facilitate, you know, things being broadcast through YouTube. But I mean, right, this is a really interesting moment where we aren't actually limited by the number of people in sharing experiences. Also, it might actually be a really interesting thing to bring panels of faculty together like this, but across the network, and you know, like once a month or something, where there's a panel that talks about COVID. I mean, or talks about like what is really on everyone's minds right now. I would, you know, and that could be something that was open to faculty and students in some way. I would totally love to be a part of that. I think it's a really great idea. So let me know how I can participate.
I love that too.
Eli, or even talk about networks.
Hmm? We can even talk about networks. Yes.
Networks.
Yes. Yes. I know you're trying to end. I think there was one thing that I really wanted to underscore, which is that, and this is something that Leanne said the other day, and I don't think it came across in one of our other ELAS meetings. Having students engage on Zoom right now is experiential learning. They have to figure out how to do this because the online environment is what we have right now. And so Leanne was trying, Leanne, I really appreciated that point. These are skills, so engaging our students over Zoom, helping them understand how to build community over Zoom. These things are skills that they're going to need when they get out into the world. And so it's also just the very act of the conversations that we're having and the struggles that we're going to have in trying to help them build community. Those are skills that are going to be really useful to them, because I don't think, you know, I think this COVID situation is going to take a while for us to sort out, and I'm not really sure if we're going to be going back to the way things were. So I think again, it's taking this opportunity and saying, hey, you know, Zoom is a little hard to get used to, but we have to. If you care about community right now, this is what we have to do. So anyway.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a skill right now. We have so many ideas, you know, Erica and I, we're going to have to, yeah, it's going to be a fun fall semester. It seems like we already have a schedule. Oh, okay. Anything else? And feel free to exchange emails, you know, check out our ELES website. It's a network and we're here to help you. And I really do like the calendar idea of sharing like all the events and speaker forums and workshops and things like that. We'll have to figure out like how do we get that out, because we do send things out via email a lot, but maybe there's a place, I don't know. I'm hearing people don't read, but I'm like, I feel like people are reading right now because we kind of have to, because we're not in person. So I don't know what the best way, or maybe there's a few ways to do this, but we'll figure out something for sure. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? I don't want to hold anyone up.
Well, I want to back up what Eli was saying. It's not just during COVID. I've worked in the private sector and we just work on Zoom. So, you know,
Workforce.
companies are only Zoom-based, online-based, everything. And there's a growing number of jobs like that.
Yeah, which makes me think about one of the other things we'll be doing this semester. I'll have to talk to our director of the career service department, but I know we're thinking about skills-based workshops for our students as they're entering into this new world of online learning, but still doing community engagement projects through the classroom. How do they translate that to receiving virtual internships and jobs? Because that's what it is now. So we're working on a few workshops to be provided like maybe once a month for students that'll just be open for anyone to drop in and really learn about how they're doing this work. So I know he's also doing some stuff in the international network with certain programs, but this is another thing to think about right now too, as you're talking about the workforce as well. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I use Slack all the time.
I use Slack. I'm in a thing right now. This is my first time doing Slack. I was very overwhelmed for like 2 days. I was like, what is this? But now Slack it's really good. Like it's very organized, the channels, everything. Like, so I'm learning too. What?
For the badge, is that for badge? For badge?
No. It's a community thing. So I was forced to do it. And I did not want to use Slack. I was like, what is this? This is no. But now that I've, figured it out.
When I was working for a blockchain company, so it was very, tech. But they used Google Calendar, Slack, and then of course Google Sheets and Docs and Zoom, and they did everything with those tools, and it was constant.
Yeah.
But it I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I have to say, we need to wrap up, but Leanne, that's how we've been working at IWT. Like I just, when things happened, I was like, all right, I've used Slack in the past, let's try it. And I'm surprised by how helpful it is. Which, again, I just wonder about thinking about how to make these different tools, but also these ways of learning how to organize our time, really transparent to students. I do think it's going to be something that's really important moving forward. Like not only figuring out like what does it mean to build community on Zoom, but also figuring out like how do I organize myself so that way I can really be present to build the community that I want to build in Zoom. Like I know that.
How do I build my LinkedIn profile?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to be mindful of time, and I want to thank everybody for being here, particularly Leanne, Peter and Eli and Cammie. It sounds like we've only just begun this conversation. So again, I think that, I'm someone who likes to try and find the positives to focus on. And it seems like despite what a terrible moment this is in the world, one good thing is that we're meeting each other and we're identifying all of these new ways that we can be learning together and learning from one another across pretty vast boundaries of many kinds. So I feel really excited by that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Erica. I've really enjoyed doing this. So
well, we can do more if you guys want.
Yeah, we will. I'm thinking of some stuff right now, but it's been really nice. I think even though I have a good support group of faculty at Bard, even with doing this work, sometimes it can feel isolating. And it's really nice to just meet people throughout the entire network that are doing this and feel the same way about things, but also have really great insight on how to be innovative right now. So this has really been helpful for me too, professionally. So thanks. Okay.
Well, thank you all, and I hope to see you soon or hear from you via email or any of the above.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That was fun.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.